And what did we go over last week? The pool at Bethesda, and what had happened at the pool? Okay. So maybe we'll read the passage over, and then we're going to take a couple of segues today, which I love to do, especially since it has to do with church history, because I love church history. So that's what we're going to do. But first, we'll read over the passage. All right, John 5, 1 to 18. After these things, there was a feast of the Jews, and the Jews went up to Jerusalem. Now there was in Jerusalem by the sheep gate a pool, which is called in Hebrew Bethesda, having 5 porticos. In these lay a multitude of those who were sick, blind, lame, and withered, waiting for the moving of the waters. For an angel of the Lord went down at certain seasons into the pool and stirred up the waters. And whoever then first, after the stirring of the water, stepped in was made well from whatever disease with which he was afflicted. A man was there who had been ill for 38 years. When Jesus saw him lying there and knew that he had already been a long time in that condition, he said to him, "Do you wish to get well?" The sick man answered him, "Sir, I have no man to put me into the pool when the water is stirred up, but while I am coming, another steps down before me." Jesus said to him, "Get up, pick up your pallet and walk." Immediately the man became well and picked up his pallet and began to walk. Now it was the Sabbath on that day. So the Jews were saying to the man who was cured, "It is the Sabbath, and it is not permissible for you to carry your pallet." But he answered them, "He who made me well was the one who said to me, 'Pick up your pallet and walk.'" They asked him, "Who is the man who said to you, 'Pick up your pallet and walk'?" But the man who was healed did not know who it was, for Jesus had slipped away while there was a crowd in that place. Afterward, Jesus found him in the temple and said to him, "Behold, you have become well. Do not sin anymore, so that nothing worse happens to you." The man went away and told the Jews that it was Jesus who had made him well. For this reason, the Jews were persecuting Jesus because he was doing these things on the Sabbath. But he answered them, "My Father is working until now, and I myself am working." For this reason, therefore, the Jews were seeking all the more to kill him, because he not only was breaking the Sabbath, but also was calling God his own Father, making himself equal with God. Okay, so it is the Easter season. Yay! I love the Easter season. And we're going to take a short segue and talk about the Quartodeciman controversy. Everybody knows what that is, right? I'm going to say it right this time. Quartodeciman controversy. There we go. Okay, so what is that controversy? What's that? 3-man. No, you're not even close. Okay, so Quartodeciman is 14. That's 14. Deci, 10, right? Quattro, 4. Okay, so it is the 14 controversy. And it is Easter. And we're going to put those two together. What might be the controversy of the 14 controversy? It is related to the resurrection.
When he resurrected. When Easter was.
What day Easter is. Right. That is what we're going to look at. Why are we going to look at that this morning? Well, it's because when we look at this passage, one, it's Easter. And two, when we look at this passage, it has to do with the Sabbath. And there is a movement, right, from the seventh-day Sabbath observance of the Jews to a Sunday observance amongst the Christians. And John is dealing with a transition, right? He's already dealing with a predominantly Gentile church at the time of his writing. And so we see him talk about the feast of the Jews, or when the Jews celebrated Passover, right? And so we're seeing that he is explaining to a Gentile audience. Well, one of the things that as Christians, we have a lot of observances that we take for granted. One is Sunday worship, right? And I am of that generation that when I was a little kid and you didn't have a loaf of bread on a Sunday, tough luck. There was nowhere to get one because all businesses were shut down on Sunday. There was nothing open. You couldn't even get gas in your tank because there was no businesses open on Sunday. To the point where in our society today, Sunday's just another day for most people. Most people are sitting at home, probably sleeping or getting up and going about their daily routine now. But when I was little, that was definitely not the case. People did nada but go to church on Sunday, and that was it. And so one of the things that we do is worship, is we celebrate Easter. But most of you don't understand, I'm assuming, you don't understand why we celebrate Easter on the day that we celebrate Easter. Why is Easter celebrated on a Sunday? Why is Easter celebrated at this time of the year? Right? And there is a history of that within the Christian community where the early church actually wrestled with that particular controversy, and that is why we have what is called the Quattrodeciman controversy, is because the early church struggled to understand that. Now, why is it called Easter? What's that? We always called it Easter, right? It was a creation ordinance right from the creation. It was called Easter. What? Got nothing to do with East. It actually has to do somewhat with the Germans. We'll point to Hendrik, right? And it has to do... What's going on? You're looking it up. Well, I'll save you the time. So there is a pagan god which is to do with estrus, right? And it has to do with fertility worship. And in the north, in Saxony, or in the Saxon realm, and in the British Isles, and that there was this pagan worship on this day. And so they adopted, when Christianity took over, the Christian interpretation of this is that we basically overthrew all pagan gods. And so therefore, we, like at Christmas, we took over their celebrations, right? The secular interpretation might be that we absorbed their celebrations. Well, in many places in Christianity, it is called the Paschal celebration, not the Easter celebration. So it is a Paschal celebration. It is a celebration of the Passover, and the Passover particularly related to the Lord's Supper and to the resurrection. As a matter of fact, interesting for the lady who just left, Anastasia, right, is from the word anastasis, which is resurrection day. So in some cultures, Easter is actually called anastasis. It's the celebration of the resurrection. Okay, so we get our word Easter from a pagan celebration. That might cause some of you tremendous problems, and that's fine. If you want to call it a Paschal celebration, fine and dandy. Many Christians do. They refuse to adopt Easter as a name for this celebration. I am not one of those. I still celebrate Christmas, right? at the time we celebrate Christmas, because we all know that that was not the day on which the Lord was born. So that's where we get the word Easter. And
why would they have an issue with Easter if it's not Anastasis? Because didn't you say the pagan one was Anastasis?
no, the pagan one is Easter. Anastasis is actually from a Greek term that means resurrection. Okay, so Anastasis, if you want to call it Anastasis, that's fine too. If you want to call it Paschal, that's fine too. And if you want to call it Easter, that's up to you, right? I will continue to call it Easter because that's what we've adopted. That's what we've absorbed into our colloquial understanding. And we have lots of words that we have adopted from culture, hell being one of them, because that has a whole etymology of the word also. Okay, so what is a quartodeciman controversy? Well, it's this. The early church had a Jewish celebration of the Passover, and it was on a particular date based on Old Testament instructions, right? And it had to do with the new moon celebration and the barley harvest, right? And so when the early church was trying to decide on how to observe the Passover celebration for the resurrection, there were some Christians who celebrated it based on the Jewish calendar. And there were some Christians that said, no, we need to celebrate it on a Sunday. Because if you celebrate it according to the Jewish calendar, it can fall on any day of the week. Right? It really is not related to a particular day. So there was this controversy on okay, these guys want to celebrate it on Sunday, and these guys want to celebrate it on whatever day of the week that falls on. And so the people who wanted to worship on the Sunday basically gained relatively quick dominance. Right? Because we gather together, and we'll talk about that in terms of the Sabbath, we gather together generally on the first day of the week to worship. And so we celebrate the day of the resurrection every Sunday, and so they just continued on with that for the Easter celebration. However, some of them kept the Jewish, and so there is this controversy within the church on the Paschal celebration according to the Jewish calendar, or Sunday, and if Sunday, then which Sunday? So the Quattrodeciman controversy has to do with 14 being the Jewish reckoning of the 14th day of Nisan, which is the first month in the Jewish calendar, which comes from the Old Testament. Everybody following along? Good. No. Nisan is not related to January at all. January would follow what calendar? Roman calendar, right? And it would originate with the Julian calendar and then later on with the Gregorian calendar. Yeah, historical terms. Fun, huh? Okay. But this is important, and from this. One is, why do we do what we do? That's important for you to know. Because it's tradition.
If you violate tradition, then you get...
That's right. So we don't want to violate tradition. Regula fide. What's regula fide? Actually, you're pretty close. It's regula fide is the rule of faith. It's how we do things as a Christian church. And it actually, in Protestant terms, it refers to Scripture interprets Scripture, is what we generally apply regula fide to. Papal primacy. What's papal primacy? What's that? Papal primacy is the supremacy of the pontiff of Rome, right? And this had to do a lot with papal primacy because it was a huge controversy between the East and the West, right? The Eastern churches still celebrate Easter on a different day than us, right? And it can go last year, it was May 2nd was when the Eastern Orthodox Church celebrated Easter. They don't celebrate on the same day, not because of this 14 controversy, but actually because they follow a Julian calendar as opposed to a Gregorian calendar. How's that? What's the difference? Gregorian calendar is the calendar that we use today, and it has to do with Pope Gregory, and was finalized in like 1582 or something like that. Okay? But it was a major division within the church that people got bent out of shape about which day we should celebrate Easter on. Like a huge deal. Now, the question of whether they celebrated Paschal, right, was not an issue. All of the Christian church celebrated the resurrection of Jesus Christ. That was not the issue. The issue was when. And the issue became so divisive that eventually it was somewhat responsible for the splitting of the Latin church and the Eastern church. And so one of the things that we have to remember is that some of these issues that, and we should be well aware of this in the age of COVID and mask wearing and social distancing, is that issues within the church that really have no real particular biblical basis can become monumental fixations within the church that cause churches to split. And that's pretty serious. So while you think, oh, who cares about the date of Easter? Right? It was a big deal. And for some people, it still is. But you should know that early in the church, they just agreed to disagree because there was no biblical mandate. And so Polycarp, one of the early church fathers, and Irenaeus, right? No, wasn't Irenaeus. Can't remember the guy he was talking to. But anyways, they had a big debate. They talked about it. Polycarp was a disciple of John the Apostle, who wrote this gospel that we're studying. And he said, yeah, we're going to keep the Jewish one. And the guy he was talking to said, yeah, no, we celebrate on Sunday. That's the day of the celebration of the Lord's Supper and of the Lord. We celebrate the communion every Sunday, and it's Sunday, and so that's what we're keeping. And they had a debate, and they went, you know what? Biblically, it don't matter. So we're going to live at peace with one another because the unity of the body is more important than what day we celebrate the Passover and the Paschal and the resurrection. Right? And so they went forward with that. Unfortunately, it didn't die. And so there was a pope by the name of Victor. And Victor decided that the Bishop of Rome, because he was in the tradition of Peter, he should have final say. And because the East didn't follow the same as the West, that no Christian should have anything to do with any of the churches in the East, because they don't celebrate Easter on the same day as us. And then Irenaeus of Lugdunum, I love that name, Lugdunum. It actually is just Lyon in France, but Irenaeus of Lugdunum, he wrote to Victor and he said, listen, buddy, cool your jets. Christian unity, way more important than you getting your own way. And the rest of the bishops backed Irenaeus, and Victor backed down. Now, that's important in church history, because when you're dealing with Roman Catholics and the primacy of the pontiff, it is an example that the church did not recognize Rome as supreme. And obviously, Eastern Orthodox still doesn't. They didn't say, oh, well, the Pope said it, and he spoke ex cathedra. What does that mean? It means he spoke from the seat. He spoke from the seat of Peter. So when you say that the Pope is not infallible because he just contradicted himself, the Roman Catholics will often say, oh, that's okay because he wasn't speaking from the seat of Peter. He was just talking. And they'll say that often. And they'll say, and then when you challenge them and you say, well, when do you know when he's speaking from the seat of Peter? They'll say, well, after the fact. Somewhere down the road in history, you can look back and say, oh, he was right. He was speaking from the seat of Peter. But then they'll go, then you say, well, how do you know that he was right at that point? And they'll go, because the church all agrees. And then you'll go, which church? Well, the Roman Catholic Church. Okay, then, I see our problem. Because you guys all agree right now, then the Pope is infallible. But you didn't always agree with his jurisdiction. It's very confusing. Yeah. And when, exactly. And you'll let her know when you're wrong. It hasn't happened yet. Right, so anyways, so church history, speaking to the primacy of the Pope, the church challenged the Pope, and the Pope backed down. And so papal infallibility and papal primacy was revealed to not be in existence at this time because of the occurrence, what happened with the celebration of Easter. Got it? Make sense? Good. Okay, so we live in a Western society, and I'll wrap up our 14 controversy, because I'm not going to say that because I seem to have trouble with it today. What's that? Oh. Okay, so when do we celebrate Easter? You should all know this by now. Next week, exactly. On what basis? On the moon. Okay, partly. Okay, so we follow a Gregorian calendar, which is slightly different than the Julian calendar, which in the early church, they would have followed the Julian calendar in the Gentile lands. It is on the first Sunday. We celebrate Easter on the first Sunday after the first full moon after the spring equinox. You got that? So, the first day of spring, you wait for the first full moon. And after the first full moon, you wait for the first Sunday after that, and that's Easter. Clear as mud? Excellent. Okay? So if somebody comes up to you and say, what is the 14th controversy? You already know that's the 14th day of Nisan, and that's when Jews celebrate the Passover. So it has to do with the new moon and the barley harvest, and we're not going to get into that this morning. Okay, so now you know, and now you're educated, and what's that?
The Thursday or Friday controversy.
What about the Thursday or Friday controversy? Yes, that's actually related to this, but we're not going to get into that today because we have to move along to Sabbath worship. The worship of Sabbath. And we only have 15 minutes, and we are not going to get through this. Okay, so what is the fourth commandment? Right. What does this mean? This means one person resting. Right? Everybody knows that. No, this is the fifth commandment, which is whack your kids. Everybody knows that song? That little, it's not a song, no, I'm not singing, that's mean. It's just hand motion, it's not a song. But it's one word. We're not going to go through it, but there's a whole bunch of movements to help you remember the 10 commandments. The fourth commandment is you shall rest on the Sabbath. So it goes like this from Exodus 20. Remember the Sabbath day to keep it holy. 6 days you shall labor and do all your work, but the seventh day is a Sabbath of the Lord your God. In it you shall do no work, you or your son or your daughter, your male or your female servant, or your cattle, or your sojourner who stays with you. For in 6 days the Lord made the heavens and the earth, the sea and all that is in them, rested on the seventh day. Therefore the Lord blessed the Sabbath day and made it holy. Okay, so in the passage that we're studying, the Jews who were dealing with this guy say, you are not allowed to carry your pallet on the Sabbath. And we talked about this last week on whether that was the right thing to say. Like, should they have got all bent out of shape because this guy was carrying his pallet on his little bed on the Sabbath? The answer was no. Okay. The reasoning was, well, we said, were they right? And you said, no, they were not right to forbid him from doing that. Is that, am I understanding you right? Yes. Why was it okay for him to carry his? Yeah, because Jesus told him to do it. And if Jesus tells you to do something, you should do it. That's important. Okay, but the Jews at the time were very, very concerned because God was very concerned about what you did on the Sabbath. And there is no question about that. Right? We remember from Numbers 15, the story is related right around the time when the 10 Commandments are given. Now, while the sons of Israel were in the wilderness, they found a man gathering wood on the Sabbath day. Those who found him gathering wood brought him to Moses and Aaron and to all the congregation. They put him in custody because it has not been declared what should be done to him. Then the Lord said to Moses, the man shall surely be put to death. All the congregation shall stone him with stones outside the camp. So all the congregations brought him outside the camp and stoned him to death with stones, just as the Lord commanded Moses. Does that sound like the Lord treats the Sabbath lightly? Not at all. It's very serious. As a matter of fact, many times in the Old Testament, the Jews were chastised in the prophets for not keeping the Sabbath day holy to the Lord. It was a lasting ordinance, a perpetual ordinance, and anybody who broke the Sabbath was to be put to death. Right? So were the Pharisees particularly right in protecting the holiness of the Sabbath day? Yes, they were. They were completely right in protecting it. But just like the chastisement to the Ephesian church in the New Testament, that you're doing what's right, but you've lost your first love. That you're not demonstrating those things as Jesus says you should have done. You should have had regard for the weightier matters of the law, right? Justice and mercy. These are the things that are of primary importance, and things after that are secondary. You love the Lord your God with all your heart and soul and mind and strength, and you love your neighbor as yourself, and those two are intricately related. And in this circumstances with this man, the mercy that has been shown to this man interpreted, I will not say took precedence over, but interpreted the Sabbath regulation, right? So is this an important issue at the time of Christ, Sabbath worship? Absolutely. It is one of those things that is dealt with a lot in the New Testament. We remember the man with the withered hand who is healed on the Sabbath, and they say, can't you heal on another day? And Jesus says, like, if you guys have an ox that falls into a pit or a donkey, then you guys pull it out. Right? The Sabbath was made for man, not man for the Sabbath. So it's not a matter of a legalistic interpretation without thought, without rational thought. It is about a heart attitude of worship to God, right? And so we see when they're gathering grain on the Sabbath, and rolling it in their hands, Jesus points back to the Old Testament, and he also talks about the fact that the priests perform their duties on the Sabbath and yet are held guiltless because of the work that they are performing. And that's important to remember because we are, as the children of God, a royal priesthood. Are we not? And so we perform our duties on the Sabbath and are yet held guiltless. So one of the things that happened in the transition from Jewish worship to Christian worship was, what do we do with the Sabbath? Because, as I just mentioned, you talk about creation ordinances and the moral law. The moral law is eternal, right? So when we talk about the Ten Commandments, we talk about thou shalt not kill. Do we put tassels on the fringes of our garments? What's that? Yeah, the first commandment is thou shalt not kill. Oh, murder, yes. Okay, yes, that makes a difference. You can still kill your chicken on the Sabbath. You can still kill your chicken. We'll talk about pacifism at another time, because that's a whole different argument. But anyways, we talk about creation ordinances, and we talk about things that are instituted from creation, right? So we talk about the sanctity of marriage as a creation ordinance, right? And things like that. And the Sabbath is a creation ordinance. I don't think there's anybody that would disagree with that. It is definitely a creation ordinance. The Ten Commandments, we would say, are part of the moral law, which is not part of the ceremonial law or part of the civil law. So you don't have to have a parapet around your house, the roof of your house, so that nobody will fall off it, right? That is not required because that was part of the civil law of Israel. It might be part of the building code depending on your roof. Okay? And we don't have to put tassels. We don't have regulations about sacrifices, right? Because those are part of the ceremonial law, which pointed towards Christ. But we would say that thou shalt not commit adultery is part of the moral law. Okay, so if the Ten Commandments are the moral law, how does the Christian deal with this law? Hebrews. Good answer. How so? And how did it come about? And why?
Well, the answer is that one day being one day holy rather than another.
That's not in Hebrews. No, sir. That actually comes from Romans.
So Romans
Okay, so the early church wrestled with this a bit, right? Because, and to be perfectly honest, they didn't wrestle with it a lot. The Easter thing was actually a bigger deal for the church than the Sunday Sabbath thing. So the Sabbath is which day of the week? Saturday. So the Sabbath is Saturday, and what do we do on Saturday? Whatever the heck we want, right? We do whatever we want on Saturday. So many, even within the early church, started to refer to Sunday as the Christian Sabbath. The question is that an accurate term? The question is, where does that term come from? And why would people use it? And let me tell you, it actually, as I've mentioned, carried on to just recently, because we observe Sunday as a Christian Sabbath, because we shut down all businesses in Canada. Well, I don't know about in Canada, but in the more Christian places, not like Ontario. But we shut down businesses on Sunday. You couldn't do anything on Sunday in observance of the Lord's Day.
wouldn't that have been
What's that?
Wouldn't that, since your argument is that one day is holy, there is no difference in days. Therefore, the Sabbath has been absolved by Christ, and we are in Christ, therefore there's...
What does the verse say from Romans? It says, one person regards one day above another regards every day alike. Each person must be fully convinced in his own mind.
So, to have a countrywide ordinance that you can't shop on Sunday would have been fair.
See, this was the big struggle. And if you look at the Westminster Catechism, the Westminster Catechism makes an argument because it's going through the Ten Commandments. It gets to the Fourth Commandments, and it makes the argument that if the Fourth Commandment is a moral law and you have to observe the moral law, then what do we do as Christians?
Don't you observe it by putting your faith in Christ?
Yes, but how does that work?
You rest in Christ.
Right.
Right. Which comes from where? Hebrews. Right? So,
So, the country should not have shut down on Sundays, they should have continued.
No, the government should have been Well, it's tricky because I feel like it was so tricky because it was a part of the ceremonial law, but it's also, the spirit of it is the moral law, which is making a concerted effort to rest in Christ on the Sabbath, whatever that is, which never stopped after Jesus came. So.
right. It is tricky, was tricky, and the Seventh-day Adventists, of which my grandmother was a member, they worship on Saturday. They believe that it is a sign of really the end times, the mark of the beast, the whole bit, that anybody would worship on Sunday, because they have an argument that Sunday worship actually came in through the Emperor Constantine, and he made Sun Worship Day, which is Sunday, the day in which the Christian church had to worship.
Actually, Sabbath comes from Friday night, sundown to sundown on Saturday night.
Right.
Therefore, and that has a lot to do with the resurrection.
Right. The Seventh-day Adventists have all sorts of problems. You had something to say, Hendrik?
Yeah, I was going to ask, do you think there's some influence that, if I remember correctly, the Jews, what they did on Sabbath, on their Saturday, was I think they took that day aside to mostly sort of educate their children in Torah and their spiritual education, like it was more of a focused day in that regard instead of, doing the field work and all of that sort of thing. So there was some practical importance to the day that had to do with growing in your faith.
Yeah, there's no question about that. And that would go on right till today amongst Orthodox Jews, right? That they observe the Sabbath. Yeah, they observe the Sabbath by doing no regular work on the Sabbath. They devote the Sabbath to God, and they spend their time in contemplation and in studying of the Torah, right? And that's what they do. But we'll go over next week very briefly. We'll go over Hebrews 4, the significance of Hebrews 4, and our relationship to Sunday worship. Okay, we're done.